Let's now continue building our map integration. And so let's now actually head over to Mapbox. All right. And so I'm using Mapbox instead of Google Maps now. And that's because some time ago, Google Maps started to actually require a credit card from you in order to be able to use Google Maps. And I don't think that's a good idea for a course like this. And actually, I also really like Mapbox. And so I think it's perfect for us to use in this course. All right. They also have excellent documentation that we're going to try out in a second here. But for now, let's start and create a new account. So just hit here on Start Building. Okay. And then, of course, create your free account. I already have one. And so just pause the video at this point in order to create that account. And after creating your account, you should land on a page that looks something like this. Now, by the time you're watching this video, this page here might, of course, have changed, and probably it has. But what we need to do now is to find a link which says something like this. So install the Maps software development kit. So this here, or also integrate Mapbox, which should be pretty much the same. Okay, so I will click here on install the maps for JavaScript. And what we're going to do here is to use the Mapbox CDN, so the Content Delivery Network, and for now, at least, not the NPM module bundler. All right. So the first step, as it says here, is to include these files here into the head of our HTML file. And so that's where we now need that extend head technique that we had before. And so that's where we now actually need that extending the head technique. So here in the tour, remember how we moved this out of the head actually, but now we still need some stuff that we need to append to the head. And so that's the script and this style sheet as well. So let's quickly translate this here to Pug. All right. And the link as well. And that's actually it. Let's get rid of this part. And let's go back to the next step here. Next up, we need to copy this JavaScript code here into our file. So into our script, of course. So right here into mapbox.js. Now you will probably not have this access token at this point. And so it either required you to already do it, or otherwise I will show you how to do it in a second. All right, let's just indent this part here. And so with this, we're actually already good to go. So this should in fact already create a map and display it on our page. And so that's because the container here is set to map. And what that means is that it will put the map on an element with the ID of map. And so that's why here in our tour, we have this element here. Where is that? Yeah. So right here, we have an element with ID map. And so the reason for that is that here in Mapbox, we actually need an element with an ID that we can then specify here. And the default is map. And so that's how I called it in HTML. Then we also have this default style here that we're going to change in a second. For now, let's go back to our instructions here. And so it says that we're done here. But now let's actually go back to our account and create that token that we need in order to actually be able to access Mapbox. So please don't just copy my token. That's not going to work well for you, but instead create your own. Okay, so you can just create a new name for it. Let's just call it something like this. And then create token here. Then you put your password. And so you can then use that token. So again, I'm not sure if it already created this token for you or if you really needed to create a new one. Anyway, it's also nice to have one token for each project so that you can then restrict that token to only that project. Okay, so I created my account here a long time ago, and so I'm not really sure again how that worked. But anyway, having that token, you should now be good to go. And so, in fact, this should now already display our default map. So let's reload, and indeed, this is our default map. It doesn't look really nice. Well, we can zoom in. But really, the style isn't all that nice and doesn't really match our website. And of course, we also do not have our locations anywhere plotted to the map. Okay, and so let's now take care of all of that. So let's go back to Mapbox, and now we go into our design studio. So let's just click here on Start Designing a Map, or again, if your website looks a bit different at this point, then just search for the design studio. So maybe it shows up somewhere here. All right. So let's try that. And so here we can really do all kinds of stuff regarding designing a map. Okay. Actually, this is not really what I expected, because it's a bit too complex to change all of this stuff here. But there are some default styles. Yeah, this is what I was looking for. So let's create new style here. And then from there, we can kind of choose a default. And really what I want is this light style. So create. And actually, I'm very happy with the way it looks out of the box. Now, for some reason, I don't see anything here. Okay, that's because it was zoomed into the sea. Okay, but anyway, let's now zoom in somewhere here. Okay, and I think it looks pretty nice already. And so let's just add a name to it here. And so I'm calling it Nader's video recording. Okay, because I already have a Nader style. But you, of course, can call it anything you want. Okay, so let's confirm the name here. Go back, and then we click here on Share and Use. And what we want is not share, but instead use. And so somewhere down here, we should see our style URL. And so, yeah, that's the one. So it has to be a URL basically starting with Mapbox. Okay. So let's just copy it, go back, and then replace the style that we have here as a default with the one that we just created. Okay, give it a save, and yeah, that looks much better. And it is exactly the style that we just created. So we can now zoom in, zoom out, or actually the other way around. We can pan the map to wherever we want. All right. And we can also define a ton of properties, so of options to this map. So right now, whenever we load the map, it always looks the same, always centered here in Boston. But we can change that by specifying the center here. Okay. And so we need to pass in an array of 2 coordinates. So let's actually get the one from LA that we used before in Postman. So yeah, so exactly this. But actually, Mapbox is exactly like MongoDB in aspect to first requiring the longitude and then the latitude. And so we need to switch them here around. All right. And let's take a look at what we get. And well, that doesn't really take us anywhere. Let's also specify a zoom level here. Let's say 4. Maybe that fixes it. And actually that was the solution. All right. So there are different zoom levels. For example, we can try out 1 here as well. And that should be then way more zoomed in, or maybe zoomed out. I'm not really sure. Okay, so that really zooms it out all the way. So let's say 10 here, for example. And as you see, I really like to play around with this kind of stuff. And yeah, so with 10, it's now really zoomed close. We can also say that we want it not to be interactive. And so that's very simple. Let's say interactive to false. And then basically your map is going to look like a simple image on your website. So as you see, I cannot scroll anything here, and I can also not pan it. So there's nothing I can do now. All right, and these are actually just a couple of options that we can set. So let's actually go back here to Mapbox and to the documentation and Mapbox JavaScript. Okay, and so here you get all the documentation for really everything you can do with the JavaScript version of Mapbox. What I just wanted to show you is that the stuff that I just showed you is actually here. So we have the container that we specified, we have the style, and we have really a bunch of stuff. So interactive, and if you want, you can of course play around with all of these. Okay, so I just wanted to show you that this is how you can learn some more stuff about Mapbox. Now, we actually don't want any of this, okay, because we don't want to center the map anywhere, but instead we want it to automatically figure out the position of the map based on our tour location points. So what we're going to do now is to basically put all the locations for a certain tour on the map and then allow the map to basically figure out automatically which portion of the map it should display in order to fit all of these points correctly. And so the first thing that we need to do is to create a bound variable. So bounds equal a new Mapbox GL dot latitude longitude bounds. Okay, and we get access to this Mapbox object because we included the Mapbox library at the beginning of our page. So right here, including this script here, okay, so this Mapbox library, this is what exposes the Mapbox GL object, which we can then use throughout our site. All right, so this bounds object here is basically the area that will be displayed on the map. All right, and so we will now extend that with all the locations that are in our locations array. Okay, and this will make a bit more sense once we actually start using that. So let's now loop through all our locations and add a marker for each of them. So for each, and let's say log for locations. And so here we want to add a marker. And for that, we actually need to create a new HTML element. Okay, and so in this regard, it really is a little bit low level, but I find that actually really nice because like this, we have a lot of control over what's actually happening in our map. And what I'm showing you here is actually just a tiny fraction of all the great stuff that you can do with Mapbox. Okay, so this here is just a standard JavaScript, and so we can use create element in order to create new elements. So just as the name says, and here we want to create a new div. Okay, and we also want to give it a class name. And set that to marker. All right, and here this is a semicolon. And so in the CSS, we then actually have a class for this marker. So marker, here you see the background image that is specified, which is this green pin here. All right, and so that pin that you're going to see in a second on the map is actually a custom image that I designed. It's not coming directly from Mapbox. And so like this, you can really adjust it to your own style and your own brand. Okay, I also defined the size of the marker here. And so, yeah, it's really customizable. Okay, and so now we actually create a new marker inside of Mapbox by saying new Mapbox GL dot marker. And then in there, we pass the element that we just created, so L, and then we also specify an anchor property, which I set to bottom here. And what that means is that it's the bottom of the element, and so in this case, the bottom of that pin, which is going to be located at the exact GPS location. Okay, so we could also put it in the center, but I think it makes more sense that, let's open that image up again. I think it makes more sense that this end here of the image is the one that really points to the exact GPS location. All right, and so that's what we do with this anchor property. So that is the marker, and now on that we can call a couple of methods. So right now Mapbox knows nothing about the GPS coordinates of this marker, right? We didn't set that anywhere. And so let's do that now. So set longitude, latitude, and equal to location dot coordinates. Okay, and so remember that this here is an array of longitude and latitude first. And so that's exactly what Mapbox expects. Okay, and so just to make sure you really understand, let's take a look at the tours. And so again, each location has this coordinates property, and so that's where we now are reading the coordinates from. Okay, so location.coordinates. And then finally add to, and then our map variable. So this map here is this map variable where we created our new mapbox.map right in the beginning. Okay, and now all we need to do to finish is to actually extend our bounds. So bounds.extend, and also with locations, or actually log, which is the current location, dot coordinates. All right. So this first part here actually adds the marker, or it creates. Let's actually make it even more specific. Create marker, then add the marker, and then here extend the map bounds to include the current location. Okay, but that is still not enough, because now we also make it so that the map actually fits the bounds. So map dot fit, no, not find, but fit bounds, and then of course our bounds object. Pooh, so a lot of work just for putting some markers on the map. But again, I find it really pleasant to work with this library. And let's now actually take a look. And I'm not really sure if everything went well here. And actually it didn't. So our maps are not really anywhere to be found. Let's just zoom out a little bit to see if they are actually somewhere. And they are not. Okay, let's take a look at our console. And indeed, there is some kind of error. So let longitude bounds is not a constructor, and indeed it is the other way around. So again, Mapbox, just like MongoDB, expects coordinates to be longitude first and then latitude. And so that's what we have here in this name. And so here it should be the same. So longitude, latitude. All right, let's try that again here. Ah, now that works. Very nice. You saw that nice zoom. That's what the fit bounds method does. So it moves and zooms the map right to the bounds to actually fit our markers. Now you see that we have this kind of other elements here overlapping our map. Okay, and so that's because of this design that I created with these wedges here. But that's no problem, because we can actually manually specify some padding to this bounds. Okay, so we can pass in an object here. And so let's say top 200 pixels, bottom also 200 pixels, and then left and right 100 pixels. Oh, and we don't have to specify the pixels here. I guess that's just me writing so much CSS. Let's try that again. Oh, nice zoom animation. But that didn't really respect our settings. And actually that's because this is not correct. So we should instead create an object, and then in there we need to specify the padding property, which then has all of this. So let's do that. Padding. And now cut this and put it there. Give it a save here. And so one more time. Man, something is still wrong here. What's that? And of course, this code should not be here. It's not in the extent. It is indeed here in fit bounds. So this is where it actually makes sense to be, right? So let's fix this code here. And now that makes sense, all right? So of course it needs to be in the fit bounds, which is in the end the function who executes the moving and zooming. And so that's where the padding should be. And we could specify a bunch of other options. And again, if you're interested in that, just go check out the documentation. So third try here. Let's hope this time I got it right. And yes, that looks a lot better. But there is still some stuff that we can improve here, because right now we cannot even know what each of these locations is. And so we actually want kind of a pop-up here, which then displays information about the location. Okay, and so not only the marker, but we also want to add a pop-up. And so that's a bit similar to actually adding the marker. So we say new mapbox.gl dot pop-up. Then, just like before, we specify the coordinates of that pop-up. So that one right here. Then we also need to define the HTML for this pop-up. And I'm going to do that now using the setHTML method, because that then will allow me to add some content right into that HTML. So set HTML and then a template string here. Okay, so I want this to be a paragraph, and the information that I want to display here is the day at which we're going to be at this location, and then the name of the location. So basically, I want to display the day, so that's why we created these day properties here, and then the description. All right, so day, and then location, remember, which is the current location in the for each loop, and then day, location.description. So give it a save here. That looks a lot nicer now. And then, just like with the other one, we also need to do add to, and then our map variable. Okay, and this will not look perfect because we need to specify some options, but I still wanted to show you the result at this point. And so you see that they actually overlap the markers now, all right? And so we can actually fix that using an offset property. So we pass that options right here into the new pop-up. Okay, so we say offset of 30 pixels. And I also noticed that we have a bit too much padding at the bottom. So let's reduce that to 150 and do this again. And so this looks pretty nice, I think. So whoever now takes a look at our page can very quickly see what kind of itinerary will be on this tour. Okay, and if there's too much information, we can also close up these pop-ups. Okay, and we could really add all kinds of stuff to this map. For example, we could like create these lines here between these points and join them together, like a green line here or something. Or we could also display the real road from one point to the other using basically directions. But let's keep it simple here. The only thing that is left to do here for me is now to actually disable the zoom functionality. Because right now let's say that we are zooming on this page, or actually that we're scrolling on this page. And so once we reach this here, and then keep scrolling here, then we scroll the map instead of the page. Okay, and so that's not a good user experience. And so all we need to do now is to basically disable the scrolling functionality on this map. We will still allow people to pan around like this, but zooming is going to be disabled. And so let's go here to our map and add that. All right, and we're not using interactive to false because then we could not even pan the map. But again, that should at least be allowed. And so the option that I'm setting here is called scroll zoom false. Okay, and again, for all the possible options that you could set here, please just go ahead and take a look at the reference. Okay, and so now when we put our mouse here and scroll, it doesn't change the zoom level. So perfect, we can still pan, and so I think it looks really nice now. Let's test this out in another one. So let's say here the forest hiker. And so that still works. And these here are kind of overlapping, but no problem, we can always close them if we want. All right, let's take a look here, for example, Sea Explorer. And if we're quick enough, we can even see the zoom animation moving the map to that location. Okay, perfect. So I hope you were able to really follow along this example with everything we did in Mapbox. Now, in case that anything didn't work, please make sure that you're using a similar version to mine. So what I mean is a similar version of the Mapbox library, which in my case here is version 0.54. And so yours should probably not be 1 point something. Okay, so if you're watching this video a long time after this recording and have a V1 here, then please go ahead and change that to 0 point something. Okay, so that there are basically no breaking changes there. All right. Anyway, with that, we actually wrap up our tour page. And so we no longer need any of this. The map is also there. And so this part of the website is actually finished. Awesome. Congratulations for making that a reality, for really starting to build this beautiful website using all these amazing technologies that you've learned so far.